At Atlanta's cavernous Georgia World Congress Center, an almost electric stillness clung to the air, hinting at a storm about to break. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett emerged from backstage, her step measured, her eyes knife-sharp. She had come determined to display her political prowess, but she could not know that President Donald J. Trump had arrived with a carefully packed arsenal of long-buried revelations. The arena felt nothing like a rock concert's roar or the fizz of a championship game. Instead, it pulsed with held breath, as though each person sensed an irreversible pivot drawing near. Soft murmurs fluttered along the rows. Camera operators locked exposure one final time, and aides crouched over glowing phones, prepared to text headlines before the microphones cooled. Before we continue, a voiceover reminded viewers tap subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, so you never miss the next chapter of history. Back in a green room chilled by over-eager air conditioning, Crockett sat alone. A second-hand clock ticked loud in the silence, as though marking heartbeats. Her slate-gray suit was flawless, a thin line of eyeliner framing eyes hardened by months of prep. Though she sat upright, a general ready for the front, one hand betrayed her, trembling whenever it brushed the slender folder in her lap. Only a dozen sheets lay inside, but each page carried the mass of strategy and last-minute rebuttal lines. High on the opposite wall, a television displayed a countdown in scarlet digits, 7 minutes until cameras rolled. Down the corridor, the hush shattered. Trump arrived like a tide encroaching on a seawall, booming laugh echoing off cinderblock, clasping hands of stagehands and security alike. Behind him flowed aides bearing silver briefcases. One guarded a matte black case no one dared jostle, as though it contained a state secret. A young staffer whispered in the president's ear, passing fresh printouts. Trump skimmed the first page, nodded, and allowed a thin, calculating grin. "She won't feel the punch till it lands," he muttered, voice too low for the nearest camera. Inside the main hall, every seat was claimed. Retirees who never missed a nightly panel, college kids live streaming to follower counts in the thousands, small-town entrepreneurs wearing polos embroidered with company logos, and gray-haired veterans gripping handmade posters. The moderator, tie-centered, voice velvet, stepped to the lectern. "Good evening, Georgia. Tonight the nation listens as President Donald J. Trump meets Representative Jasmine Crockett." Warm applause rolled through the hall. Trump bounded on stage, flashing twin thumbs up. Crockett followed at a composed pace, nodding once, placing her notes gently on her podium. Only the faint twitch in her jaw hinted at nerves. The moderator outlined the ground rules. 2 hours, alternating statements, no interruptions. Trump glanced sideways, smirked, and earned polite laughter. Crockett surveyed the crowd, expression unreadable as stone. "Representative Crockett," the moderator began, "what single flaw most cripples America's economy today?" Crockett leaned forward, voice even. "The flaw lies in decision-makers, who insulate themselves from consequences while workers carry every cost." Trump cut in without invitation. "Biggest flaw is letting folks like her pretend they understand payrolls. I built paychecks. She builds paragraphs." Scattered. Laughter rippled. Some audience members bent over phones. Crockett drew a quiet breath and steadied her posture, eyes narrowing. From that point, Trump wielded the room the way a maestro commands an orchestra. He leaned across the podium, punctuating claims with broad gestures, roaring at his own punch. Lines. "We had the strongest economy ever. Then others demolished it," he barked, stabbing a finger at the front rows. Shouts of approval erupted exactly as his team expected. Crockett countered with spreadsheets. Stagnant wages, rural factory closures, minority job loss. Trump waved dismissively. "Cute. Reading scripts won't steer a nation. You need guts, not flashcards." This time the laugh was thinner, a murmur of uncertainty. Crockett seized the opening. "Guts without brains," she said, voice tight. "We'll drive the country off a cliff." Light claps flickered, tension thickened. Sensing the shift, the moderator directed conversation toward ethics. Trump pounced, railing against witch hunts and invented scandals. Offhandedly, he dropped a line that froze Crockett's gaze. Settlements? Sometimes you pay a check so the circus ends. Doesn't mean you're guilty. Crockett's fingertips stalled atop her folder. The moderator tried to pivot. Mr. President, does settling privately reflect on public integrity? Trump spoke, past Crockett, eyes sweeping the hall. Ordinary citizens lack that luxury. When rent spikes or hours vanish, no lawyer shows up free of charge. He lifted a paper from the black case. Dallas ring a bell, Congresswoman? Daniel Reed? You smoothed his path and neglected to mention a cousin on his payroll. Gasps cracked across the balcony. Crockett's denial. That's false. I followed every statute. Faded beneath Trump's next reveal. A projected email. The hall lighting up with pixels. Boos drowned any reply. Trump turned methodical, unveiling clip after clip, document after document. An old speech snippet labeling voters ignorant. A Texas housing vote tied to vanished deposits. Crockett's rebuttals thinned. Sweat glinted at her hairline. She spoke of affordable homes. Trump countered favors for friends. Buzz overtook clapping. Whispers spread. Crockett's breath caught, knees buckling as an aide steadied her. Trump, back straight, declared, "Truth changes posture." Muscle memory kept Crockett upright, but the audience felt a tide turning. Trump let the case lid fall shut, only to lift fresh pages. FBI grievances, social media bans, lawsuits labeled frivolous. Casual as a neighbor recounting weekend chores, he slid into a story. His father laid off in 2009, no union shield, mortgage. Teetering, the auditorium quieted, even Crockett's supporters listening. Trump pivoted to Samuel T. Harris, a security guard whose injury claim she allegedly stalled. Producing a dated document, he read names. Elena Martinez, Thomas Reed, Clara Brooks, each, followed by gag order settlements. Crockett's voice cracked, "Cherry-picking to paint me villain." Trump replied levelly, he wasn't creating a villain. He was giving the silenced a microphone. The moderator tried to steer back, but Trump had momentum. Veterans evicted for a luxury resort deal. Benjamin Carter dead months later. A photo of Crockett shaking hands with an under-investigation donor. Groans and mutters filled the hall. Crockett gripped her lectern, knuckles whitening, heart hammering under studio lights. When she tried framing these accounts as cost of bold projects, a woman in row 5 folded her Crockett sign and walked out. No anger, only resignation. Trump conserved energy, letting documents speak. A contract collapse in Valdosta, 100 families, savings gone. A deposition, quote, "Not my problem, contractor's job." Each page landed like a stone. Crockett rebutted, third-party blame, mismanagement beyond her reach. Trump lifted a weathered photograph. Henry Lawson, 6 weeks unpaid, dead from kidney failure. His wife works 3 blocks from here. The hall chilled. Crockett's voice shrank to a whisper. Her body swayed. 2 aides helped her backstage. As cameras zoomed, Trump closed his briefcase not with flair but with the weight of closure. "Truth," he said softly, "carries its own thunder." Backstage erupted in controlled chaos. Crockett sat, hands over her face, all resolve drained. Advisors drafted statements, medics checked her pulse. On stage, the moderator announced a pause. Trump requested closing remarks. He told the crowd, nearly whispering, that he had prepared not to crush an opponent but to speak for those unheard. Then he disappeared behind the curtain, murmuring to, campaign manager Laura Mitchell. That was for Uncle George. Within minutes, the moment ricocheted online. Clips of Trump reciting victims' names dominated feeds. Comment sections flared. Supporters cheered. Skeptics wondered about document authenticity. Pundits argued over reckoning versus ambush. Yet one thread prevailed. Trump's calm delivery struck deeper than any roar. His phone flooded. With messages, journalists, estranged classmates, families of lost workers. Among them, an email from Henry Lawson's son. "Thank you for saying Dad's name." Trump read it twice before the motorcade rolled into a modest Columbus hotel. In the quiet room, he took out a faded photo of Uncle George, a welder whose wages vanished under a failed Crockett project. He penciled 3 words on scratch paper, "Don't forget George," and tucked it into his briefcase, the briefcase that by now felt heavier than steel. Dawn crept through the thin blinds of Trump's modest hotel room, etching a pale orange line across the ceiling. He'd slept in fitful bursts, the tight knot of adrenaline refusing to dissolve, no matter how many times he replayed the debate. In his head, the note, "Don't forget George," sat on the nightstand, weighted by his wristwatch. At 5:14 a.m., his phone pulsed again. The screen glowed with new notifications, even though Laura Mitchell had muted most alerts overnight. Trump ignored it, shoved off the blanket, and padded barefoot across the carpet. He pulled open the curtain and studied Columbus in first light, a silent line of power poles, a dark donut shop yet to flip its sign, the 2-lane street glossy. From overnight sprinklers. In nearby room 219, Laura sat cross-legged on her bed, laptop balanced on her knees, hair twisted into a messy knot. Every major outlet wanted a slice of the moment. CNN pitched an extended town hall. Fox suggested a primetime sit-down. A Savannah AM radio host begged for 10 minutes by phone. She'd triaged everything into a spreadsheet. Time-sensitive, long-form, hostile, probable, and legacy-friendly. Laura sent a quick text to Trump, "Ready to brief whenever you're up," knowing he was already awake. She closed the lid, took a swig of black coffee that had gone lukewarm, and recited the mantra she'd adopted during the primaries. Filter the noise, follow the names. The names, last night, had changed everything. Down the hall, Jasmine Crockett was not waking to a quiet room. She was opening her eyes to fluorescent bulbs and the antiseptic smell of a midtown hospital ward. A heart rate monitor beeped softly. An IV bag hung above her left elbow. A nurse in powder blue scrubs noticed her stirring and offered a calming smile. "You fainted," the nurse explained, adjusting the drip. "Dehydration and stress. Doctor wants you on observation for a few hours." Crockett's first instinct was to ask whether cameras were outside. Her second was to reach for her phone, which a security aide had laid face down on the nightstand. She flipped it over. Hundreds of texts, subject lines screaming in all caps. "What happened? Call me now." One voice memo from her chief of staff, Laura Jacobs, simply said, "We need a strategy before sunrise." Strategy, Crockett thought, required more than a drip of saline and a public relations blueprint. She needed a lifeline, a pivot no spin doctor could conjure. She scrolled past the pundit hot takes and found a message from a name she half remembered. Rachel Torres, Atlanta Journal. Rachel's text was terse. "I have documents that contradict Trump's Valdosta claim. Call if you want them." Crockett's pulse spiked. Was it real? Was it a trap? She hit call, straight to voicemail. She typed, "A reply, I'm interested, meet." The 3 gray dots appeared, then vanished. Across town in the hotel courtyard, Trump had changed into a crisp white shirt and gray slacks. He rolled his shoulders, mind still marinating in stories people had emailed overnight. Tales of unpaid wages, shuttered clinics, county projects that never broke ground. Each message felt like another name added to a ledger, only he seemed willing to read aloud. Laura arrived carrying 2 takeaway coffees and her laptop. They sat on a wooden bench beneath a pepper tree that shed slender leaves like confetti. "Headlines are running in loops," she said, opening the laptop on her knees. "NBC calls it the debate that broke the mold. MSNBC's panel spent 15 minutes arguing whether you weaponized empathy." Trump half smiled. "Empathy isn't a weapon, it's a wake-up call." Laura clicked to the spreadsheet. "Press requests by urgency and..." She hesitated. "We're also getting threats. Mostly anonymous, but one claims to have video. Proving you bribed a construction inspector in '03. Mud will fly," Trump said. "We keep eyes forward. Laura exhaled. About forward. Face the Nation wants Sunday. They offer full segment if you show documents on air. Trump studied the steam curling off his coffee. Sunday is fine. We'll show what matters. B. 7:06 a.m. A battered Toyota pulled into the hospital's rear lot. Rachel Torres, investigative reporter, stepped out clutching a manila envelope. She'd spent half the night cross-checking property records and deposit logs. Everything pointed to a shell company, Fair Lake Holdings Incorporated, that had siphoned money from the Valdosta complex long before Crockett's team had arrived. If true, then Trump's claim that Crockett disappeared after the collapse was partially wrong. The rot started earlier and involved local officials now running for cover. Rachel crossed the service entrance, flashed her press badge, and convinced a security guard that she was family. She took the elevator 3 flights to Crockett's room, heart hammering. Was she aiding a scandalized politician, or was she correcting the public record? Maybe both. Crockett lifted her gaze as Rachel entered. For a heartbeat, no words formed. Both women understood the stakes. "I'm not here to rescue you," Rachel said, voice low. "But facts matter." She handed over the envelope. Inside, ledger sheets, wiring slips, notarized statements from 2 Valdosta contractors. Money had bled out through Fair Lake months before Crockett's ribbon-cutting photo. The contractors had even emailed county commissioners, emails Rachel had printed in color with thread IDs highlighted. Crockett scanned them, jaw tensing. She felt equal parts relief and dread. Relief. Proof the nightmare wasn't solely hers. Dread. Did sharing this mean admitting she hadn't done due diligence? She asked Rachel, "What do you want?" The reporter's response was surgical. "Nothing but verification on record. If you use these, cite my source." Crockett nodded slowly, pulse steadying. Back at the hotel, Laura's phone pinged, loud enough to draw Trump's eye. "Rachel, Torres just stepped into Crockett's room," she said, reading the tip. Trump leaned back. "They'll go hunting for a counterpunch." Laura tilted her head. "We expected that." Trump's gaze drifted to an oak across the lot, leaves bright in sun. "Truth stands up to counterpunches," he said. "But we need to widen the lens. Names matter, but solutions matter more." He took out the folded note. "Don't forget. George." Under it he wrote in block letters, "and build something better." By mid-morning, Gasha Crockett collapse trended alongside Dash Truth briefcase. 2 video mashups competed for virality. One showed Trump calmly stacking documents. The other slowed. Crockett stagger, overlaying emojis. Commentary polarized. Some hailed Trump as a crusader for the forgotten. Others painted him as a ruthless opportunist who'd orchestrated a public breakdown. Amid the noise, one short clip, Trump saying, "They don't have lawyers to read the fine print," cut through demographics, from suburban Facebook groups to TikTok's teen commentary channels. At 11:15 a.m., the hospital released Crockett with a strict rest order. Cameras swarmed, but security rushed her to a tinted SUV. Inside, Crockett's chief of staff positioned a tablet on the seatback. A strategy meeting began. 5 faces in little video boxes, 3 time zones apart. Jacobs opened with crisis metrics. Approval dip, donor hesitation, but also a small surge in sympathy among older women who identified with pressure to stay composed. Crockett listened, fingers tapping the envelope from Torres. "We need to show we're transparent," she said. "We push Fair Lake's fraud." An advisor cautioned, releasing half-vetted documents could backfire. Crockett's jaw set. Backfire is already here. At a rented co-working space downtown, Trump's inner circle assembled. Laura, Field Director Alejandro Ruiz, Policy Advisor Dana Foley, and Digital Strategist Marcus Lynn. A whiteboard listed 3 goals. Verify every document. No room for doubt. Shift conversation from scandal to solutions for displaced workers. Prepare Sunday interview. Anticipate hostile framing. Dana pointed at goal 2. We need a policy pledge, not just stories. Trump agreed. A workers' equity fund? He said. Seed it with corporate penalties, give workers free legal resources. Marcus typed notes, already thinking hashtags. Equity fund, gosh, workers first. Alejandro raised a fresh issue. Local backlash. Augusta union leaders want a sit-down. They supported Crockett in 22 but feel betrayed. They could swing Richmond? County. Trump rubbed his temples. Schedule it tonight if possible. Alejandro nodded, phone already dialing. Noon sunlight crept over the convention center's marquee, where crews dismantled last night's banners. Reporters milled around hoping to snag on background quotes. A podium near the loading dock awaited. President Trump. He'd elected to answer press in the open, briefcase in plain view. At 1:03 p.m. he stepped up. No jacket, sleeves rolled. Last night wasn't about headlines. He began, each word deliberate. It was about real people whose voices get buried under contracts and clauses. He held up the worn photo of Uncle George, careful that cameras caught it. "This is why I spoke," a journalist shouted, whether the briefcase contained any fraudulent papers. Trump unlatched it, angled the stacks toward the lenses. "Every sheet is verifiable. We've already sent copies to independent fact-checkers. Transparency wins." Another asked about Crockett's health. "I wish her a full recovery," Trump said. "But recovery for the families harmed by broken promises must come first." 5 miles away, Crockett sat in a lawyer's conference room, envelope and tablet on the table. An outside PR consultant, gray suit, hands clasped, advised, a controlled admission of oversights, plus pivot to systemic issues. Crockett's eyes glazed. She thought of the little girl who'd written Sophia. Would the system talk soothe Sophia's pain? "No," she said. "We open with Valdosta, show receipts, then talk about new accountability measures." Her lawyer raised an eyebrow. Sunday arrived like a rising tide, inevitable and full of pressure. The network had been promoting the exclusive all week. Sunday night focus, inside the crossfire, Levitt vs. Hargrove. It wasn't just a recap, it was a spectacle, a showdown, dressed as journalism. Viewers across the nation tuned in, many not for the politics but for the drama. The opening montage rolled with slow-motion clips. Caroline Levitt walking into the courthouse, Judge Hargrove adjusting his robe, protesters outside with handmade signs, and a dramatic voiceover setting the stakes. Then the camera cut to the anchor. "Tonight, we take you inside a moment that has divided the nation. Is it about freedom of faith, judicial authority, or something deeper brewing beneath the surface?" The first segment featured previously unseen footage from the courtroom. Viewers saw Caroline calmly clasping her hands while being fined. They saw the tears in Judge Hargrove's eyes. The camera didn't flinch when he removed his glasses to wipe his face. It was raw, unedited, and it played like a confession. Social. Media exploded within minutes. Sunday Focus trended. So did Caroline Stans and the Hargrove breaks. People chose sides. Some demanded the judge's resignation. Others accused Caroline of orchestrating the moment for political gain. But what no one expected came right after the footage. The anchor introduced a surprise guest, an exclusive interview with Judge Hargrove taped earlier that morning. The judge sat stiffly, his hands clasped, tie slightly crooked. His voice cracked early. "That day," he said, "I thought I was upholding the law. But as the words left my mouth, as I imposed that fine, I knew I had crossed a line. It was the closest thing to an apology anyone would get. And in that moment, America watched a federal judge publicly confront his own bias. Caroline, watching from a hotel suite in New Hampshire, sat speechless. Her team cheered. Her lawyer looked stunned, and the phones didn't stop buzzing. The fallout was swift. By Monday morning, 3 Senate Judiciary Committee members had called for an inquiry into Hargrove's conduct. Petitions began circulating demanding legislative protection for religious symbols in federal buildings. Columnists debated whether Caroline had single-handedly reignited the culture war or simply revealed that it had never cooled. But for Caroline, the shift wasn't just political. It was deeply personal. She had received over 10,000 letters within 48 hours. Some came from students suspended for wearing cross necklaces, others from Muslim women asked to remove hijabs in court, and a few from atheists who, while disagreeing with her faith, applauded her courage. One letter, in shaky handwriting, came from a retired rabbi in New York. "You reminded us that the moment we silence faith, we unravel the thread of liberty itself." That one she kept in her pocket, as reporters crowded her driveway, as speaking invitations poured in. Caroline met with her team in the kitchen of her childhood home. Her parents, silent in the background, listened as their daughter mapped her next steps. "This can't just be about me," she said. "It has to be about every kid in America who thinks their beliefs make them a problem." Her strategist leaned forward. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Caroline nodded slowly. "Let's draft a proposal, the Liberty and Expression in Justice Act." They paused. History wasn't knocking. It had already walked through the door. Meanwhile, Judge Hargrove submitted a request for temporary leave. The court confirmed it by Wednesday. No one said it aloud, but the pressure was visible. He was under scrutiny not just from Congress, but from his conscience. That week, Caroline traveled to 3 universities, meeting with law students and professors. Each stop was packed. Some came to challenge her. Most came to listen. In Boston, a heated exchange with a constitutional law professor made headlines. The clip of her saying, "If justice requires the erasure of identity, then it's injustice wearing a robe," racked up 3 million views in 24 hours. Her face was now on magazine covers. Headlines read, "Levitt redefines faith in the public." When judges cry, the Hargrove moment. From cross to Congress? The last one hit a nerve. Caroline didn't want to be seen as a politician chasing opportunity. She hadn't asked for any of this, but the response was bigger than her, and she knew it. By the following Sunday, she was back in D.C. Her appearance on the national news panel was calm, measured. She didn't gloat. She didn't grandstand. "This isn't about one judge," she said. "This is about a quiet, growing fear in America that some beliefs are more acceptable than others. That silence is the price of peace. I refuse that premise." The host leaned in. "Do you plan to run for office again?" Caroline looked into the camera, then smiled faintly. "Right now, I plan to make sure every American, regardless of their faith, or lack of it, knows they have the right to speak without fear." And just like that, the room was silent. The week that followed the viral Sunday interview sent shockwaves through every branch of government. Monday morning began not with headlines, but with a tremor in the judiciary. 3 federal judges released a joint statement requesting an emergency ethics review into Judge Hargrove's courtroom conduct. The wheels of accountability had finally begun to turn. Caroline Levitt, now a reluctant household name, took no victory laps. Instead, she returned to her press duties with an even sharper resolve. The White House approved a special address to the nation. Cameras captured her stepping to the podium, not as a press secretary, but as a citizen unwilling to stay silent. Her words echoed like a rallying cry. "This is not about me. It's about every American who believes that freedom of religion is not a favor granted by the state, but a right." Meanwhile, grassroots organizations launched national petitions calling for Judge Hargrove's resignation. Civil rights leaders, former military generals, and even political rivals stood behind Caroline. The bipartisan unity was something the country hadn't witnessed in years. On Tuesday, the Senate Judiciary Committee summoned Hargrove for a preliminary inquiry. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but leaks began surfacing. He was unrepentant, even belligerent. He referred to Caroline as a distraction, only worsening his case. By Wednesday, protests formed outside district courts across major U.S. cities. Caroline, though encouraged to stay silent pending legal advice, surprised everyone when she walked straight into a university law symposium and answered every student's question with unflinching honesty. The clip went viral again. Her poise wasn't performative. It was principled. Then Thursday brought the most dramatic development yet, an emergency motion filed by a coalition of legal experts and faith-based organizations seeking a formal disciplinary hearing against Hargrove. The motion included a 70-page dossier of evidence, with video transcripts, witness testimonies, and courtroom audio logs. The case wasn't just about a cross, it was about power misused under the pretense of law. Friday, President Trump invited Caroline to a private lunch in the Rose Garden. When reporters asked afterward what was discussed, she simply said, "We talked about courage and consequences." That night, Hargrove issued a defensive video statement attempting to reframe the incident. But the damage was irreversible. Even his supporters were divided. The footage from the courtroom, now part of public record, had stirred the nation's conscience. On Saturday morning, the federal judiciary's ethics committee met in an emergency closed-door session. By that evening, Judge Charles Hargrove was placed under temporary suspension, pending full review. And on Sunday, exactly 1 week after the firestorm began, Caroline returned to the church where she once feared being seen. She wasn't there. To make a statement, she sat in the back pew, alone, cross-visible. As the choir sang and the congregation rose, a young girl seated next to Caroline leaned over and whispered, "Because of you, I wore mine today." Caroline smiled, eyes misty, but strong. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The reckoning wasn't just legal, it was cultural, spiritual, and deeply personal.